What if your parking space could do more than just park your car? What if it could help redefine urban living, make it greener, smarter, and more sustainable? Welcome to the first New Year episode of Canada Talks Electric Cars, brought to you by EV Society. My name is Tim Burrows. If you're not yet a member of EV Society, make 2025 the year you join our growing community. Not only will you help accelerate the shift to electric vehicles, but full members also enjoy exclusive sponsor benefits. Today, we're exploring a revolutionary project that's reimagining how we live, drive, and build communities. Eve Park is the name of this net zero condominium community in London, Ontario. It's more than just housing, it's a bold leap forward in sustainable design, urban living, and EV infrastructure. One of its most exciting innovations, a cutting edge EV charging enabled car stacking system that saves space, boosts efficiency, and challenges the traditional idea of parking. This isn't just a development, it's a glimpse into the future of how we connect our homes, vehicles, and our sustainable lifestyle. Please submit any questions. If you have any questions at all, you're welcome to submit them through the Zoom Q&A. And if you wish to, you may raise your virtual hand and we'll unmute you and let you ask your question out loud. To take us through this game-changing initiative, we're thrilled to welcome Ashley Hammerbacher, Managing Director at S2E Technologies, the visionary team behind Eve Park. Ashley will share the story of how this project came to life, the challenges they've faced, and the potential it holds for the future. Let's dive in. Ashley, thanks for joining us on this episode of Canada Talks.
Thank you so much for having me, Tim, and EV Society. I'm very honored and excited to be here today and excited to walk through our journey of how we got to where we are today with Eve Park. So thank
Yeah,
you.
yeah. I had a chance to come out and tour the facility. I guess it was in October this year, and it was really impressed. You have a lot of interesting aspects to this project, and I know you've been doing this in other places in the world, but as we were discussing before we came live on the webinar, a lot of learning that went on, I guess, because you're doing things for the first time in construction and design and development, and that always brings with it a lot of learning, as you said.
Yes, very much so. There's been a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, to say the least, that went into this project. But
Yeah, I
we're
bet.
very proud of where we got to today.
Yeah. Okay, Weston, I'm going to get out of the way and let you have that if you'd like to share your screen.
Wonderful. Well, thank you again, everyone, for attending and taking your time out of your evenings to join. Really grateful for you taking the time to learn a little bit more about our project. Before jumping in, I just thought I'd give a little bit more background about my role with this project. I am a project director at S2E Technologies, but also the project lead for Eve Park. So I manage all aspects of the project from the design, engineering, construction, budgeting, sales, and marketing, all the way to the operations of the community that we'll talk about today. My background is in bioengineering and civil and environmental engineering, so I tend to come at things from an engineering mindset, but I certainly learned the importance of all the disciplines in getting to sustainable projects and getting them across the finish line. But before getting into the project details, I thought I would share some of the background about our team to better understand our why and why we do the projects that we do. The thread that connects all of S2E's work is our understanding that climate change is absolutely our greatest challenge and that we as a team are going to do something about it. So S2E was founded in 2006. We're headquartered in St. Jacobs, Ontario. We are a sustainable development company that specializes in sustainable real estate, transportation, and energy projects. Although we were founded in 2000, we actually started as a utility scale solar farm developer. We developed the two largest solar farms in Canada at the time, and the manufacturing facility for Canadian Solar in Canada. Through this experience, we noticed that there was a pretty big gap at the time in installation of solar on residential buildings in Ontario. So we quickly jumped into the installation of solar on residential buildings in Ontario. And using our knowledge of renewables and energy efficiency space in the built, we brought all of this knowledge into the built environment. This is most recently demonstrated in our West 5 and E Park projects that I'll be sharing more on today. And we learned quickly about how we could make significant emissions reductions in both the energy and building sectors. But as we dug further, we identified another problem and another way that we could make substantial impacts in Canada, which brought us to the problem statement that launched Eve Park. So every morning, millions of Canadians step out of their front doors to streets that are dominated by cars. Our driveways, garages, and roads are the centerpiece of our neighborhood. However, there are some fundamental truths about these cars. First, they sit idle for 95% of the time, and they're responsible for over a sixth of Canadian emissions. On top of that, they completely dictate the way we live. How can we live sustainably if our neighborhoods are essentially shrines to our cars? This is why we challenged our residents and developers to reimagine our relationship with transportation by asking a simple question. What if we designed our neighborhoods for people first and not their cars? And that is how we came up with a mantra for Eve Park, which is to live in a park and not a parking lot. So we went to our international design team of Gensler, one of the top architects in the world, and Studio Drawer with this challenge to and project definition that you see on the screen today, where we wanted a net zero energy community that was designed for the future with an inspiring design, integrates nature and technology, and has a forward-thinking approach to personal electric vehicle transportation. Ultimately, we wanted to know what a community could look like if we didn't have all this typical car infrastructure. And we even actually took it a step further and asked, what would it look like in the autonomous vehicle future? What happens when we don't need all the garages that dominate our front doors and all the driveways? So before going into the design, though, we're a pretty research-oriented company. So we wanted to better understand where people were at and what they wanted. So I took out a couple of studies that I thought would be particularly interesting for this group that we did. And at the very beginning, 17, when we first gave birth to this concept, we ran a study with about 1,000 respondents across Canada. And we gave them a high level text explanation about what we envisioned for the project, talking about net zero living, car sharing, electric vehicles. We gave a brief descriptor of what our parking solution would look like, but we just wanted to see how people would respond to the concept. And some interesting conclusions came out of that. The first was that the concept really resonated with young millennial men and the highly educated demographic, but it received across demographics. So we took this as a tentative okay that we have something. So we proceeded with the schematic designs and some of the initial concepts with our design team, both Studio Drawer and Gensler, and then also a team of local engineers and consultants to come up with the initial designs and renderings for Eve Park. And we launched a Facebook campaign where we shared some of the original project renderings and concepts. We collected over 2,000 subscribers around that and released a weekly newsletter about the project. We sent out a couple of surveys to better understand their interests and did a couple of focus groups on one-on-one interviews. And specifically, we were curious about people's transportation needs and requirements. And there were two fundamental findings that we found in one 2019 study that we did was we could look at potentially reducing the parking ratio, so the number of parking spots per unit, if people had access to car sharing. And the way we saw that is that if people didn't have access to car sharing, they were much less interested in giving up that second vehicle. And the other thing is that there was quite a bit of enthusiasm for electric vehicles. And that electric vehicle infrastructure was necessary. So this is just a sample of the research. We did multiple surveys and information gathering sessions, as I mentioned, and really engaged with the community. But we definitely learned quite a bit during this initial visioning stage about what it would look like to price sustainable transportation. in a development. And that's where we came up with the concept for Eve Park and the project that you see on your screen today. That is the actual picture of the first phase of Eve Park, which is constructed and occupied today. So Eve Park is a two-phase project. The picture on the screen shows the first phase, and then there will be an identical second phase that will be right adjacent to the property. There are two identical buildings with 21 units each. They range from one-story, one-bedroom units on the lower end of the building to two-story, two-bedroom units, three-story, three-bedroom units, and then on the higher end, four-story, so stacked two-story townhomes, making 21 units each. It is a completely net zero energy community, meaning that over the course of a year, all of the electricity that's being consumed by the residents is offset by the electricity generated on the rooftops by the solar panels. And one of the key features of Eve Park is there are two parking towers at the end of each building. So there's a parking tower on each side of this tall 5-story part of the building. Here's a little zoomed in picture for what that looks like. This is the fundamental feature that was incorporated by our design team to help reduce the impact of cars on the property. Instead of having a big surface lot or a lot of infrastructure and money underground lot, we were able to condense the parking for 20 vehicles in the space that would typically be taken up by four cars, which is an incredible densification feat that we were able to achieve. We'll go a little bit more into this in a little bit because there's quite a bit of technology that went into there. Again, a little bit of an overview on Eve Park. There are 84 for-sale condominium homes. These are all for sale. They're net zero energy. They're all 100% electric. There's no gas on the site. There's quite a bit of sustainability features, including water conservation, really high quality items, an automated parking tower integration, and then we'll talk a little bit more about the all electric car share fleet as well. But also ultimately actually connected to the West 5 smart grid, which provides battery backup for the condominium complex, so that if there's ever a power outage, there's a couple of hours of backup power that's provided by this. And just to give a little bit more context of what that West 5 community is, we were the technology partner with Sifton Properties, a developer that's developed quite a bit and is a leader in sustainability as well. Where this project is 2,000 living units with over 46,000 square meters commercial and office space. We helped come up with the entire master plan to make this a sustainable and net zero energy community. And that microgrid that I mentioned that provides backup power for Eve Park also services West 5. For this group, we have quite a bit of electric vehicle charging integration as well. And actually, as part of that microgrid, we have 16 level 2 chargers with 20 ports, and then one level 3 charger with 4 ports, which is attached directly to the microgrid. Again, given that this is such a sustainable community, that was an important part of the community, is to make sure that we had charging infrastructure for the commercial spaces that are there, as well as the 2,000 residential units as well. And that's going to continue to build out. That's just the starting charging infrastructure that we have there. Also importantly, which I really want to mention because of the entire journey of Eve Park, we in West 5 and in Eve worked with a consortium of universities across Canada to come up with the initial concepts behind West 5 and Eve Park, and integrated quite a bit of new technology and research. And this was pretty important for the design concerns that you see actually in Eve Park and West 5 are the result of quite a bit of research from over 100 students worked on this project over the course of the almost 10 years now that West 5 has been in development. Now, a little bit more on the transportation specific side of Eve Park. So again, on those parking towers, we have 2 parking building, and there's a little drone video that's showing at the bottom, and I'll pull up another video just showing how a car pulls up. But all of these parking towers have electric vehicle charging capabilities. And so I'll show in a little bit as well. There's a charging cable that runs across the pallet, and each car can connect to there, again, allowing for some high density electric vehicle charging. The concept that we're building out to, again, we were thinking of this for the autonomous vehicle future, was to have autonomous vehicle automatic charging systems. So having a robot arm plug in, that's not available today, something that we really see as critical for the deployment of these towers, considering the advent of self-driving cars in the marketplace. As I mentioned before, this is huge densification of parking spaces by repurposing the land that would have been taken up by a big surface lot, and instead you can focus on greenery and gardens and really executing on that mantra of living on a park and not a parking lot. Then we are integrating app interface, which allows for the residents to have a really easy way to operate the have a very convenient process. Some additional things is from the perspective, because the towers are located in, sorry, the cars are located in the tower, it's really challenging for a third party to get in there. And so it adds additional security features. And here's just a quick how they operate as well. So a car can come up, there's a transponder that reads the card, and people can drive right into the pallet. For right now, once they get out of the car, and then they'll plug in their car. In the future, we hope to have the technologies for the car to drive in and then have an automatic connection. And it's a pretty seamless process. It takes a couple of minutes to for the cars to rotate throughout the parking garage. So this entire system has been definitely a big sales point for the residents, but also has been a big benefit from a sustainable transportation perspective, because not only does it allow for a denser charging system, but it also is the electric vehicles, again, having them all in that central area. Here's a close-up picture of what that charging connection looks like, and the charging cable runs along the pallet. We did quite a bit of research over several years about this system. So it's like it's a carousel, almost, we sometimes describe it as a Ferris wheel type of system. And these are deployed all over the world, actually. There are over 730 installations worldwide, with in 35 countries on 6 continents, except for Antarctica. They are very simple, which was something that was very important for us. It has quite a few issues that different municipalities, employers are seeing with just having enough parking spaces. And this last point I'll talk to in a little bit is very big, is that we have worked for years trying to get for the certifications for this to be operating in Canada. Despite it operating around the world, there was a lot of work that our team put in to be able to make sure that these were safely and easily deployed across Canada. So we'll go into a couple of those challenges, because Tim was asking about regulations as well on that and what our experience was with those. Central to Eve Park's sustainable have the Eve Car, or a electric vehicle car sharing program. So this is an all-electric car share fleet that is servicing all the residents in Eve Park for right now, for the 42 units that are there, and 30 households are currently occupied. We have one Model X, Model 3, sorry, that's a typo there, one Model 3 and one Model Y. The Model 3 and Model Y have hourly rates, and then a daily rate that they can pay to use it. We found that this was, again, paramount to allowing to have just one parking spot. So because of that, all of the residents were able to reduce down to one vehicle. And we found that as part of the sales process, really highlighting the cost of that second vehicle was crucial. So describing, in one of the statistics that we shared, is that in Canada, it's over $10,000 a year just to operate that second vehicle. So if people could use the car sharing program for the errands, or having that second vehicle needs of having, if somebody in the household is using the primary vehicle, this was a huge benefit to having that reduction of cars per household. Then something that's just teasing on something that we're planning on working on and actually have been developing this for several years is actually some autonomous features of Eve Park. So because of the parking tower infrastructure, it really lends itself well to having this autonomous feature where someone could pull up as you're seeing in the video. They could get out of the car looking and spent quite a bit of time looking at these autonomous robots that could help pick up luggage or if you had or something. So in this video, you can see the person grabbing their bag in the back and then putting in the autonomous. And then the idea was for the car to be able to park itself in the parking tower so they can just use their app. And then self-driving cars, if you're not going to have somebody there, as you saw in the earlier video, then you need something to charge it. So there were a couple of technologies that we explored. One was a wireless charging technology, which currently they're really in the commercial marketplace. And then the other idea, robot arm, which we actually have a prototype of to do the plugging in a car charger. So again, this is something that, although it's not currently implemented in Eve Park, really shows the versatility of the technology to evolve technologically with our vehicles and allow for that electric vehicle future where we have the driving cars. So it's kind of an interesting concept that we've been working on for quite a bit, but again, another testament to all of the work and research that we've been doing with our university partners and industry partners to deploy these. Now on to the fun stuff, which are the key barriers, lessons, and issues that we've come across through our time at Eve Park. As I mentioned, but we spent quite a bit of time focus groups and meeting with different Londoners and also people across Canada, but mostly focusing on London on what their transportation needs were. And we found that it was absolutely critical to communicate that total cost of car ownership. So walking through what that insurance cost is and maintenance costs and understanding all of that was really critical to boosting car sharing and understanding that it's not so much something that is to turn to once you see all the costs. And from a programmatic perspective, it's a very convenient program that we're offering through EveCar. The second thing on here are the policy and regulatory issues. So for ePark in general, one thing that we really try to emphasize is that none of the technologies that we have currently implemented are actually that new. It's the amalgamation of all technologies that's really the innovative aspect of ePark. And so the heat pumps that we have, the solar panels that we have, the energy recovery ventilators or fresh air machines that are in each of the units, none of those are new technologies, but again, the integration is something that's quite unique. And the same thing applies to the parking towers. So as I mentioned, there are over 730 installations worldwide, but this is the first in Ontario. So there is an administrative body in Ontario, the Technical Standards and Safety Authority, which processes these parking tower lifts. However, we're the first ones. So they didn't really have a clear rule book that they abide by to review these parking towers. So it was a very long and drawn off process to get these approved, where we were going back and forth trying to understand each of the different aspects of the parking tower to prove that they are safe to use. And there are a couple of things that were big challenges. The first is that the current regulations mandate us that we hire device mechanics. So people that are specifically trained for hours and hours on how to operate and maintain elevators instead of the more qualified professionals like licensed electricians, millwrights, welders that would be qualified to work on this. So that was a big challenge. So we had quite a few people go through these EDMT training sessions to train, which added time and expense to the project. And another fun one that we have as well is that there's a requirement to have annual load testing. So literally getting sandbags weighted on the parking tower to show that it's safe to operate, even though the structural engineering stamp and a structural engineer who does all of the different calculations to ensure that the parking tower is operating. So again, it's there's quite a bit that we with a TSSA to try and show that even through all of that, now we come to a point where we figured it out and we have these licenses and in operation. So one of our hopes and one of the things that we're working on is deploying these across Canada and really sharing this technology now that we've come through these initial barriers and we've made it through. So we now have a path forward. The other one on here is that we were required to have Canadian welders weld, despite the manufacturers' welds that had to do over 700 of these towers worldwide. They have a process. So there's quite a few learnings that we did there to get to where we're at. The other interesting thing is this is actually the parking towers are a Korean technology, but the average Canadian car sizes have increased significantly since the inception of this project. And because of that, we actually have towers, one that's a sedan sized parking tower and one that's an SUV sized tower. Um, the need for sedans have drastically decreased even since we started this project in 2017. You'll see that the car sizes have actually substantially grown since then. And so truck size park spots are also required. And one of the other things that we've been finding is that luckily these are rated quite heavy vehicles, and with electric vehicles and the weight of the battery, we are able to a lot of them, but some of the very large trucks that you see, electric vehicle trucks like the Lightning or the Cybertruck, cannot be accommodated in these some of their size. So throughout the process, we've definitely learned a lot. You could talk to anyone and we could probably each write a 3,000 page book about all the lessons that we've learned through this project. But um, we're very good that have held our hands through this process and we've made it through. And so now we have a completely occupied, an occupied first phase, and we're looking to the second phase, hopefully this summer, some initial sales on that second phase. So that is the highlight of my presentation today. I wanted to make sure that we had enough time for any questions, or are there anything in particular that people wanted to ask about on the technology or on the project? And wanted to thank everyone for your time today. Very much appreciated it.
That's great. Ashley, before we go to the questions from the attendees, I assume you're using the NACS standard so any car that can take the new North American charging protocol will work in that situation.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah, and you alluded to the fact that vehicles are getting bigger, so pickup trucks are no problem in that facility.
No, so pickup trucks are too big for this parking tower. So actually right now they're going to be having to park in the shared parking area outside. So actually right now on the slide you can see there's some cars in that area across the road.
Hmm.
And that's something that we've learned is that in future projects there's another size parking tower that would accommodate larger vehicles, and that's what we would need for future projects given how big Canadian vehicles have gotten.
Yeah, no, so I kind of expected that might be a bit of an issue. And not to, I don't want to go on long about regulations and challenges there, but out of curiosity, the challenges that you've sort of pushed through and hopefully make it easier for other people doing similar types of projects. How many of those regulations are provincially specific versus Canadian national? Like, are you going to have to reinvent the wheel in every province to some degree, or?
Well, so the TSSA is an Ontario organization, and so everything that we've gone through with them is for Ontario specifically. But what we've found is that a lot of them have very similar standards, and actually, we've been lucky enough to visit some of the installations from partners in the United States as well to learn about how different jurisdictions handle these. A lot of actually areas have it so that the local city is actually the jurisdiction that has authority over the parking towers. So it depends on the city on how they regulate it. But as with any new technology, the more times you do that, the more engineering calculations all the work that we put into that, we have so many testing hours, so much rigorous study on this that we can share this with other deployments. So yes, there's some variability between jurisdictions, but we'd like to say that we've taken a hard path and we have some of the
Yeah.
some of the stars for that.
Yeah, you can probably anticipate the questions that are likely to come from other provinces, and you have the answers prepared. Is basically, I think, where you are.
Yeah, and a lot of the provinces tend to copy each other as well on the regulations, so it's not like they're reinventing the wheel, luckily.
Yeah, great, great. Okay, I'm going to call on Jason Arnaud to take us through some questions. I think we have a bunch of them stacking up there now.
Yes, we do. Thanks, Tim, and thank you, Ashley. So the first one is hopefully an easy one. When you need your car, how long does it take to actually get access to it?
So from the top pallet down to the bottom, it should take around 2 minutes at the very, that's the longest time. One of the regulations things that we've been working on is that they actually require us to slow it down from a regulations perspective. And so because the system's actually made is designed so that it can get done pretty quickly, actually in 90 seconds. But we slowed it down a little bit just to make sure that again it meets the Ontario regulations.
Does it play some music for you to listen to while you wait?
Unfortunately not, but one of the next phases that we're looking at is having that application, mobile application, so that people can summon it beforehand, so they can do that, so that they're not waiting outside for their vehicle. They can actually queue it up, so they're ready to go, make
That's
their
a new,
coffee, queue down
that'd
the
be
car.
a new take on elevator music.
Exactly. Actually, one of the fun ideas that one of our car sharing team led told us is that the reason they put mirrors in elevators is so that people, like, when they're waiting in the elevator, they are human nature. We like to look at ourselves, and so maybe we need to put a mirror or something, or have some fun thing for people to do for those 90 seconds. But it goes by pretty quickly.
Great, thank
That's
you.
the worst case scenario too, if it's at the very top.
And do you know offhand, out of the parking structures in use right now, how many are actually being used by EVs?
So right now we have three with electric vehicles actually. And that's three purchasers, and we have two electric vehicles car sharing. So that's five total that are EVs.
Okay, out of what was it, a total of 24?
Out of 29 households.
And I assume at that level, power sharing is not a problem for everyone that wants to charge.
No, but we have it so that we can have up to we have four ports per charger system. And so we have it, sorry, we have four chargers per system. So we're able to manage it quite well. But again, we don't have that many chargers right now, so it's not an issue for right now.
Great, thank you. Um, Rick asks, how much do they cost? And Rick, I'm paraphrasing this. I assume you're asking about will there be low income units?
There are not at this stage. However, that's one big thing that so not in Eve Park specifically. However, it's something that because we've developed all of this technology, it's definitely something that from a developer's perspective, by reducing the amount of land that's taken by the parking towers, you can actually save by building more units there. So as obviously we're in this housing crisis, we need more units. So if you can use that for livable spaces rather than cars, it's a big benefit. So that's one of our focuses for future developments is trying to deploy this technology in affordable developments. And actually, in one of our next developments, that's exactly what we're trying to do is by leveraging some of these smarter strategies in all of our learnings to develop affordable housing.
Okay. And can you talk a little bit about pricing range for the units, if not current, at least, phase two?
Yeah, so they range. Right now, they start at around $698,000 for our smallest unit, and they go up in price for larger units. And so we have several two-bedroom units, three-bedroom units, four-bedroom units available. And actually, one of the big concepts that we've been seeing is that we have some multi-generational living units where actually there are two different units in one house essentially. So the lower floor acts as a granny suite or a smaller self-contained unit that has its own kitchenette, sorry, full kitchen and washer and dryer system. that has an ability for college student or a grandparent or somebody to live in that space while the rest of the family lives upstairs. They have their own entrances, and so that's actually one of the another interesting element of Eve Park that's a little bit unique is that we are trying to look at different family structures and living situations for people to again help with the affordability and understanding that it takes some time to build up equity if you're young and living with your parents, but at the same time also thinking about the aging population wanting to live with their families. So that's a particular unit type that I think is quite unique for Eve Park.
Yeah, we definitely need more of those. John, I see you have your hand raised, so I can allow you to talk and you can actually pose your question.
Awesome. Hi, this is John Rich. I was very impressed with the research and the thinking to kind of future-proof the development, the work that you guys put in. I just recently got a Cybertruck, and I wondered if power share was something that you were thinking about integrating with the development.
Like power share, like vehicle to grid type thing or vehicle to house.
Yeah, well, I guess it's really vehicle to anything, but specifically vehicle to, building, structure, house.
Yeah, so we've been spending, we actually spent quite a bit of time at the very beginning of the project looking at different bidirectional charging systems. At the time when we first built phase one, there were not a lot of commercially available bidirectional chargers. Actually, only at the time the Nissan Leaf was available to do that. Now things have changed. Now that we're in 2025, now I have to get ready for the calendar change, 2025. But that's something that we definitely want to see in our future phases, potentially even phase two of this project, but for future projects, especially given that this is connected to a microgrid, being able to take from the cars is a no-brainer for us, especially if it's just sitting there, being able to use the battery system. But the reason why we didn't have it in phase one is just the bidirectional chargers weren't available really commercially at that time in 2019 when we were doing the initial purchases for this.
Got it. Thanks.
Great,
It's a
thank
great
you,
question.
Rich. John, sorry. Stephen, while we're going, you can unmute and ask your question.
How has the charging bus performed in the winter? That was has it got ice build up or FYI, I was involved in the original design, so I that's why I'm asking this because I'm curious because I'm no longer involved with Eve Park.
Yeah, so Steven is one of the people who had his blood, sweat, and tears in that parking tower, and it would not exist today without him. So it's kind of like a plant in there in the audience to have the question. But thanks, Steven. Yeah, so from everything that we've seen, it's actually performed quite well. We haven't had a ridiculously cold winter yet, but from everything that we've seen, and actually over the Christmas holiday, everything performed really well with the parking towers and with the chargers, so no concerns noted yet.
Awesome.
Okay, and related to that, we have a number of questions asking about where does water go? How does salt coming off
Mm,
cars during the winter? How does the parking structure handle that?
really great question. So all the pallets are tilted so that they can drain off, and then there's a drain at the bottom of the parking towers. There has to be some weekly or bi-weekly maintenance to make sure that salt's removed from there, but because of the tilt that allows for water drainage. We also have one thing I didn't mention, but you could kind of see from the pictures there that it is an open system, and so the facade is actually a perforated metal mesh with we call them airplane cables, but they're ropes for vines to grow up. So I'm excited for this coming year for the first time for those vines to actually flower and look nice. But those are open. So everything is designed for to be open to the elements. So it is not 100% enclosed.
Okay, great. And related to that, any I guess it's not a concern about water or other debris falling on people because the elevator is enclosed and no one's supposed to be in there other than getting out of their car. Uh, is there kind of overhead protection when you're getting out of your car?
So when you're in the garage, you're in the garage, so there is the roof, and so you're not gonna get rained on or anything. But that's one of the things that is a learning for this next phase is that there is no overhang on top of the keypad area. So that mobile device is going to be mobile app, sorry, is going to be very important for having people being able to queue it if it's raining or with weather that we've been seeing over the past couple of weeks with lots of snow, making sure that we can have that queuing ability.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm going to interrupt for Ashley. I remember there was some discussion, and I don't remember the totality of it, but about security. Can you tell us about security? Like somebody sneaking in before the door closed? Like what's the what protocols have been put in place for that aspect?
Yeah, so that's a great question. We have quite a few sensors actually in the tower. So if there's any movement, the parking tower will not move. And so from a safety perspective, if there is a person that's climbing in or a squirrel or something that comes in and triggers it, it will make sure that the system will not move. And so if there's somebody who sneaks in under, a kid decides to try and run after their basketball that went under, the parking tower will not operate. There'll be an alarm system that goes off, and that goes to our remote operator that can see the cameras, see what's going on. They see that Sally has a basketball in there. She went in to get it, and then they'll pause the operation and they have to override the system to make it operate again.
Great, thank you.
Okay. And back to EV charging, the demo videos that you showed Teslas, which all have a fairly consistent charge port location. How does the tower accommodate vehicles with charge ports in other locations?
That's a great question. Something that we've had to look at. So you have to run the cable and put the actual charger on another part of the pallet. So if it's a front charger or on the other side, then it's just a movement of where the actual cable is ran. But yeah, it's a great question because it's unfortunately not standard.
So does that imply that everyone has a dedicated parking pallet?
So all of the electric vehicles have, so if you have an electric vehicle, then you go to an electric vehicle pallet. And we're having right now, because there's not that many, we have one charger that fits them all, and then they can have a converter if they have a different charging system. But right now, all electric vehicles, if you have an electric vehicle, it will bring down an EV pallet. However, we do have the capability of later on, you can assign different parking spots, but it is nice from a usability standpoint that if your parking spot had happened to be at the very top, you don't have to wait until it gets to the bottom. It's just the next available pallet, essentially, you can drive in and have available.
Okay. But if it became necessary, like I had a special charger that I needed, or it had to be in a certain spot,
It's
you're
all
technically
possible.
capable of it.
Yeah, it's a fun optimization problem.
Okay. Alan asks, what's the plan to scale this type of project to other communities in Ontario or across Canada?
Another good question. The plan is really to take a lot of the components of ePark. So you may not see these circular designs or this exact design, but the different components and really implement these into different types of buildings. So we're looking at a 5-story apartment building, for example. It doesn't look exactly like ePark, but it has a lot of the same components, heat pumps. We're looking at parking towers. We have solar panels on all of them. A lot of the learnings that we have from having the courtyards of having those centralized spaces is being incorporated. And so really the way to scale is not being so dogmatic on this exact design has to go in, but really taking those learnings and applying them and partnering with others and hopefully having others copy as well. Unfortunately, we don't have all the time and resources in the world. So seeing other developers take these concepts and showing that these work, that net zero living works, all electric living works, heat pumps work in cold weather, parking towers work. All of these lessons that we went through, we want to share with others and work with others to make sure that this is deployed across Canada because we don't have the luxury of time.
That segues nicely into a question that I had. So you have, what is it, close to 60 units?
84 across all four
84.
buildings, but we have 42 right now.
And of the residents right now, did you find a lot of them coming to you because of net zero? Or was there a lot of this is what net zero is and this is why it's good education that you had to do as part of the sales process?
That's a question. There was a good combination, actually. So there were some people who were just really interested in the sustainable elements. I would say that everyone was interested. I wouldn't say that that was their top priority. A lot of people are looking just for a nice place to live and they really like the community. The fact that we're in West 5 is a really big element because it's a walkable area. There are restaurants and um, amenities in the area. They can go to the yoga studio or the fitness studio right there. There's an animal hospital. So it's kind of a self-contained little community. So that's a definite big bonus. But there was some education in there and a lot of people who are really curious and wanting to learn. I know that one of our residents was so eager to share with their their family and actually wanted to know everything they could about the solar system and the microgrid system so they could tell their family about it. And so there was a lot of learnings and education, but it wasn't like a school type of education. It was just people were really eager to learn how they works and appreciate all the technology that's in their homes. And it's not, at least from the feedback that we got, overwhelming and challenging, but it's rather something that enhances their experience rather than being onerous to deal with.
Okay. Uh, David asks, what happens if the lift breaks down? Is there an alternate way to get it to your car?
Yeah. So we have a couple of backup systems. So if there's a power outage, there's a way to the microgrid servicing the project, but then also we have ability to plug in a backup generator. There's also a manual override system that actually lets the car down if needed, but that would need a third party operator. And then worst case scenario, just from a customer service experience, you have Uber credits. So if somebody has their car breakdown and needs to get somewhere, it's easy to offer a quick ride share to allow them. Because again, we want this to be as seamless as an experience as possible. And been pretty fortunate that, knock on wood, things have worked out. And again, we were quite intentional in the design of choosing a simple operational system. It's not super complicated like some of the other lift and shuttle systems that we looked into. So it's a pretty, well, knock on wood, easy operations and maintenance system.
Okay. And staying on parking, which is obviously a big topic, can you talk about what the cost of a tower parking system like this is versus traditional underground or surface parking? Obviously surface parking's the cheapest, but you've
If you have
obviously
land.
done a comparison.
Yeah, so it depends on the system and what you have on there. I will say that we had to add quite a bit of cost to the parking spots to get through this initial certification process. If we didn't have to do this, it would be substantially cheaper to go through a kind of a more traditional and just install the parking systems as they come. But we did have to make quite a few modifications. So because of that, it really depends on the jurisdiction, but it would be between 25,000 and 45,000 Canadian per spot. And that's in comparison to surface parking spots that depends on your land costs and how much you can deal with that. But underground parking, again, and this is one of our kind of pet peeves, is that it's really hard to get underground parking costs in different areas because it really depends on site development costs, whether you're already digging down into the ground and building up the foundations, if you have to put in more foundations, what the type of soil is. But underground parking spots can cost upwards of $60,000 a space in some areas. And so it does offer savings. And if we can figure out some of these, and which we have already actually, and so implementing some of the savings that we've already incorporated from going through this regulatory process, we can inch closer towards that $25,000 per space for these.
And Ashley, I expect that there were a lot of reasons why you chose London, Ontario for this particular project. So is that some of it relating to costs or just the cooperation from the utility? I mean, there must have been a lot of sort of moving parts in that.
Yeah, so we were involved with West 5 with Sifton, and so that was a big portion because we spent a lot of time learning about London and learning about the area and kind of felt really comfortable developing ePark there. London's also really interesting in that it's used a lot as a test bed in Canada. I don't know if you've seen this, but like London's the #1 market to test out like new restaurants, or like McDonald's, I think, went to London for the first time because to test it out when they were coming. And so like these are test out new things. And so London's a perfect test bed for new concepts. And so we thought that if we can get this working in London from a market perspective, it would be really interesting to deploy across to other Canadian communities. And you touched on another component is that we worked closely with Sifton and also London Hydro. And London Hydro has been fantastic for developing the microgrid system. And so having that partnership has been very valuable. So we're pretty grateful to be in London. They've definitely been a wonderful community of folks that are interested in doing something new. So, but we're hoping to deploy in other places too.
Yeah, I think you might have mentioned, did you mention Nova Scotia as another project?
Yeah, so we've got a couple of projects going in Nova Scotia. We're hoping to do some more in the GTA area as well. And if there's anyone on the line that's got projects or parking systems, we'd love to look to expand across Canada, North America. We've got a footprint across North America.
Great, thanks.
Okay, Tim, we can squeeze one or two more in.
Yeah, I think we have time for at least one more.
Okay, let's see. There was a question about how are the solar panels doing with snow?
Yeah, so interestingly enough, really the best production comes on during the summer months. Obviously, because of where we're located in London, it's not great in the winter, and so they don't perform terribly well during the winter. But because of all the production that happens in the spring and summer and early fall months, you get enough production to offset those months where it performs worse. We've actually done quite a few calculations earlier on to see, okay, would it make sense financially to clear off the snow and try and get the production? But because you have such a short day, the solar radiation in London's not great. And so it makes sense to just kind of leave it, and it melts off after a day. Usually you don't have to wait for longer than a day, but you're not getting a lot of production in these months, unfortunately.
Yeah, the shoulder seasons are not the best, right, for solar, but
No.
yeah, well, thank you. Thanks, Jason. Appreciate that. Going through all
Thank
those
you, Ashley.
questions. And Ashley, thanks so much for coming on. I think it's a fascinating, aspect to the way we're likely to live in the future. I mean, it's kind of been a dream to think about a net zero kind of a lifestyle. And I learned a lot by walking through as well the actual units. They are minimalistic. They're not, expansive sort of units, but they're extremely comfortable, functional, and the temperature, the way it's managed in those units is fantastic. Really, you did a marvelous job in the design of them, and I can just see it's going to get better, right, as you go forward.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Tim. And honestly, if anybody ever would love a tour, we'd love to set something up so you can see. Again, we want people to see the project and learn from it, and we want to share what we've done. And so, if anybody's interested in learning more, we would be more than happy to host anybody at Eve Park. So please don't hesitate to reach out.
That's great. Thanks. Thanks so much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Thanks, Tim. Thanks, Jason, as well.
All right, so let's take a look next month on the webinar. We're going to welcome folks from Switch Energy, Jason Cruikshank and Thomas Martin, who will be sort of demystifying electric vehicle charging for condos and apartments and other larger buildings. Condo charging And apartment charging is a real issue and a reason a lot of people are holding back from electrification. So I think it'll be a very timely topic. We'll learn what's going on behind the scenes and what some of the solutions are to retrofitting older buildings. Yeah, something we're really going to look forward to. So remember, please to mark that date. It's going to be on Tuesday, February 4th, always starting at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time. And I'd like to thank everyone for their questions today and always, for supporting this webinar. We do appreciate it very much. And we welcome you to drop us a line, if you have any topics or speakers that you would like us to cover in this webinar, let us know. And even if you don't have a direct contact, we'll chase them down and we'll try and get them on and do an episode for whatever that topic might be. So, from all of us, I'd like to thank you again for being here, and we really appreciate you watching. We'll see you next time.